This meeting is being recorded.
Good to know. Well, welcome everybody to day 2 of the Boomer or Bloomer seminar. My name is Mike Mansfield. I'm a member of both the Wise Move and the Brave Starts organization, so lucky to be part of both. Today, we've got a really interesting topic. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship for people 50 and older. But before we start, maybe we just have a quick introduction so that those who are new to the call learn a little bit about what Wise Moves and Brave Starts do. So maybe, Inge, would you like to say a few words about the Wise Move Society?
Oh, I have to unmute. Yes, thank you very much, Mike. And welcome also on behalf of the Wise Move Society on the second day of the summit. We're really excited to be able to present here this event together with our sister organization from the UK, Brave Starts. A little bit more about Wise Move Society. It's an international online community for the over 50, where we together transition into that next phase of our life. We believe it's very important to work on healthy aging, build new networks, make new friends and have fun. And of course, focus on who we want to be when we grow old and what we want to do. So for those who want to stay in the workforce as an employee, it's important to create that multi-generational work environment where we feel welcome, valued, fulfilled, and challenged. With our teams of experts, we work together with organizations to create that environment. But the Wise Move Society is also a huge supporter of senior entrepreneurship. So our topic of the day, not only because we believe in small and mid-sized companies as the backbone of our economies, but also because we as the over 50 are statistically more successful as entrepreneurs than those who are starting at earlier age. And I speak from experience. I started my latest business at age 60, and believe me, it's not going to be the last one. So you can understand that also in our community, we support our members to develop that entrepreneurial mindset and create new opportunities together. So looking forward for today's session and the amazing guests that we have lined up for you. So Mike, the floor is yours again.
Thank you very much. Lucy, do you want to introduce Brave Starts real quick?
Only very briefly, just to say, yeah, I mean, Brave Starts, we're another not-for-profit community based in the UK, and we're really about supporting people after sort of 20, 30 years in a job, and they're thinking, I'd like to carry on working, just not 100% sure what I want to do next. We help people get to that place where they're a bit more clear about what it is that they want to do next.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for the introduction. And I think maybe just what we've both said really ties into the topic today. We can see that our members are traditionally people who may be viewed as people who are mid to late career. And I think stereotypically are often viewed as a group that are thinking about their retirement rather than the next steps in their career, which is why it was wonderful on Tuesday when we did the poll to ask people whether they were a boomer or a bloomer, that 74% of the participants said that they found themselves to be a bloomer rather than a boomer. And that's a group that's really ready to shine and sees many, many more productive years ahead of them. So today we're going to talk about entrepreneurship and why that's something you should embrace throughout your life. On Tuesday, we heard Bradley and Elizabeth talking about the multi-generational workforce, and Aviva speaking about why it's so important to reinvent ourselves at so many stages during our lives. And I think discovering our entrepreneurial spirit is really a key element in helping us navigate longer and more productive lives. An entrepreneurial mindset is really something that increases our self-confidence. It builds our sense of purpose and curiosity, and is something that's really going to help us stay engaged throughout our lives. So one thing we've seen over the course of the past decades or so is that traditional views of how we live and work are changing. And when I was working at my last employer, I headed up their global retirement research program. And one of the consistent findings we had in our research was that people really envision and staying active when they are retiring. And while many people had as an aspiration traveling or spending time with friends and family, 1 in 10 people had as an aspiration starting their own business. And their reasons for wanting to stay active or to stay working in later life were often very positive ones. 51% of people said that they wanted to do so to keep their brain active or to stay alert. 34% said they were enjoying their career. And again, about a third of the people said they had a concern about whether they'd have enough retirement income or their savings would last. And I think it's important that people are looking at entrepreneurship from both sides, both as a way of making money, but as a way of staying engaged. So one of the things we did when we were at Aegon was we developed a Silver Starters program together with the Leiden Academy in the Netherlands and partners in Portugal, Italy, and Poland. And our aim there was to help people who were age 50 and older answer two questions. Firstly, is entrepreneurship something for me? And secondly, how do I go about setting up my own business? And we're very lucky that one of our panelists today is Han van Doren, and he was the winner of the first Silver Starters program. And he'll be able to tell us a little bit about his experience today. So in that first program, we asked people what they got out of the course and got some really interesting responses from people. 85% of the respondents said that they had become more active because of taking the course. And 2/3 said that they had gained self-confidence and were more prepared for the future. So I think there are really strong results today. And today we're going to dive into the topic of entrepreneurship. Mary Cronin, our first speaker, is going to tell us about her research and why entrepreneurs over 50 are more successful than other groups, similar to what Inga had said. Hannah is going to share his personal experience, and Elizabeth will help us discover our entrepreneurial spirit and tell us about the work she's doing to support experienced entrepreneurs. So before we start, we're going to do a poll. But before we even do the poll, I'm going to tell you one tip I learned on Tuesday. At the moment, I can see everybody on the screen, and that's wonderful for our discussion. But there is an option at the top for you to be able to change your view so that you can go to speaker view, and then you can focus on the person who is speaking at the time. So maybe, Elsabe, if you could pop up the poll, we can ask people the first question. So we're looking here to see, I'd like to do a poll at the beginning, at the end, to see, I'm thinking about setting up my own business, and to see if you agree or disagree with that statement. Just give it a second to. That's a good result. So I think there's a strong interest, obviously, in the topic. Already 52% of people are strongly agree that they are looking at setting up their own business. So we'll see how that number changes after our inspiring speakers today. So now let's test Mansfield's ability to use technology and share his screen. I want to introduce Mary Cronin, who is our first speaker. And Mary is a research professor at Boston College and president of 4Q Catalyst and the director of the Center for Aging Entrepreneurship. Alongside her work, Mary offers consulting service, and Mary is the author of Starting Up Smarter, Why Founders Over 50 Build Better Companies. And that is a wonderful, wonderful book in terms of how she has set the scene, taking examples from her interviews, but also combining it with her own research and insights from other people. So just as a brief introduction, we would ask Mary to say something a little bit about her research and the work she's done, and see how that can help us get our discussion started today. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Wonderful. Is that my cue?
That's your cue, Mary.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thanks to Brave Starts and Wise Move, and especially Mike, who's been really a guiding light for me in all of the work that I've done over the past several years since I was fortunate enough to get to know Mike. And I'll start by saying, very similarly to starting a new company, when you're thinking about writing a book, really it's a two-part process. You write the book because there's something you really, really need to say and you want to share it with the rest of the world. And you also, in the process of writing a book, find out new things that you didn't know. And it's a process of learning. And for me, starting up smarter, why founders over 50 build better companies was both of those things. And I'd like to take just a few minutes to share not so much the research, but the learnings and the insights that I gained in talking to so many entrepreneurs over 50 in the process of creating the book. So as Ingen already said, there's a lot of research that says statistically, the data shows that if you're over 50, you are more likely to start a successful company than if you're in your 20s. Despite all the media, despite all the spotlights on young founders, a study in the US of 2.7 million founders who started a company and went on to hire at least one employee showed that if you were 63 years old when you started that company, you are 10 times more likely to have a successful company 5 years later than if you were in your 20s. Wow. That is not a widely appreciated piece of data. If you are between the ages of 53 and 60, you are 4 times more likely to be successful and start a high growth company than if you start as a founder in your 20s, in your early 20s specifically. So that's the kind of data that I wanted to share in the book, because I feel that despite that reality, the word is not yet widely appreciated. That we, those of us on this screen and in this movement, are likely to succeed if we do have an entrepreneurial mindset and if we do go ahead and start a company. I knew that before I wrote the book. That was my motivation, to share that kind of information. Also, another thing that I knew before writing the book was a lot of great studies on how people over 50, quite aside from their entrepreneurial instincts, want to make a difference in the world. That is a period of time when we begin to think about our legacy. What are we going to do to make the world a better place? What are we going to leave behind? Not necessarily material goods, but in terms of the changes we're able to make, the good things we're able to accomplish. And there's a very strong drive at this period of our lives to make a difference and to leave a lasting impact. And so those two pieces of research, those two insights based on data, help us to answer the why. Why do founders over 50 build better companies? They do, in part because of this purpose, this desire to make a difference in the world. And it's hard. Those of you who are with us and will contribute to the discussion today are going to probably share the challenges that are involved in being a founder, in being an entrepreneur. It's not easy. It doesn't matter what your age is. It's not easy to start and operate and grow a business. There's a lot of challenges that come your way. And when you're over 50 and you have a purpose, that comes with perseverance, that comes with grit and determination. And that's what I learned and was so inspired to learn, talking to so many founders for Starting Up Smarter. I'll give you just a few examples and how this all fits together. So Jeffrey Harris was a vegan when he was 14 years old. He dropped out of college and he went to India to learn how to meditate, to learn about Eastern philosophy. He came back in his 20s and he thought it would be the best thing in the world to start a vegan restaurant combined with a bookstore with readings in philosophy and maybe some music on the side. And he teamed up with a peer of his age and went around trying to get this restaurant started. And as he says himself, I was a total failure. I didn't know anything about running a restaurant. Nobody would even talk to me, or never mind fund me. But that vision that Jeffrey had kept with him when he went into a more traditional career in sales. And when he got near 60, he said to himself, world, if this is ever going to happen, if there's going to be a vegan fast food restaurant that's like the next McDonald's, but it's going to help save the planet by reducing animal cruelty and all the other things that I care about in my life, I've got to do it. How am I going to do this? I'm going to reach out. I'm going to look for other people to do it with me. And I'm not going to take no for an answer. Now he has co-founded something called Plant Power Fast Food, which has already opened 10 vegan restaurant chains in the US and has raised already $10 million in funding to get him to his vision of becoming the next McDonald's, but with kindness and vegan fast food. So another story, Paul Tasner got laid off when he was in his mid-60s. Quite a surprise after a 40-year successful career in supply chain management. And he was far from ready from retirement. And he had a vision based on his own experience, which might resonate with a lot of us. He couldn't open the darn plastic electronic things that he and his wife bought. It was so hard to get the package open. And he said, not only is plastic one of the worst pollutants on the planet, but this is a problem I really feel called to solve. And I'm going to start a company to solve it using all recycled products and paper-based pulp material wrapping instead of plastic. He got turned down. Paul asked for venture funding, angel funding, any funding. He got turned down almost 100 times. No one would fund a first-time founder who was in his mid-60s. Apparently, they didn't read the data. And so he said, I'm going to keep going, change my business model, and ask the suppliers who are going to make the plastic, the non-plastic recyclable packaging to fund me. And he did. And 10 years, 11 years later, in his mid-70s, he's still in business, very profitable company, really making a difference in the world by reducing the amount of plastic waste. One more story, and this is another why. When we're over 50, we have rich, deep human connections. Now they call them social networks, but I call them friendships and connections and important relationships. And we have more of them as we get older, and we know how to grow those relationships. And we also have expertise. And another founder that I featured in my book, Wendy Gutterson, she had a career in healthcare management. She had a crisis in health in her own family, in her own life, and a very unsatisfactory series of interactions with physicians who were so busy taking the electronic notes during her visit that they couldn't even look her in the eye. And she knew, and they knew, that that was not a good thing for the world or for health or for well-being. And Wendy, in her 50s, left her career path in hospital management, and started her own consulting company. And she told me, I sat alone in my home office for a year, thinking, I've left my job. I want to change healthcare. I want to change how doctors can relate to patients. And I have the expertise, and I just have to keep going. And again, 8 years later, Wendy has employed over 25 people. She has served over 150 healthcare practices in the United States. And all of her business is grown by word of mouth, referrals. She didn't decide to become a Facebook advertising whiz. She decided to do the work that she set out to do by talking to her friends and getting referrals and using her expertise to solve problems that she knew physicians were facing. So my insight here to wrap up is that, yes, it is hard to start a company, but we over 50 are good at it. We are likely to be successful. And the assets we have to bring are that we have a purpose, we have persistence and resilience. We don't take no for an answer. We look for other solutions when we run up against barriers. And we have a deep expertise and network that we can bring to solving problems. And when we put all those things together, we are going to be happier, more fulfilled, and have the impact in the world that we set out to have. So that's why I'm so excited to be here with so many powerful, expert people and to join in the rest of the discussion and conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. That's great. The takeaways in terms of having a sense of purpose, the determination, the networks, and the looking for solutions, I think really are key elements. One of the things, just before we move on, there was a question from Despina from Dow, and I remember reading it in your book. There was in terms of access for finance and how venture capitals looked more towards younger founders and older people, and there's often an age cutoff that just has no logic really, but is a barrier for people. That's something that I think people really have to use their networks to try and find creative ways of getting finance to start. But didn't know if you wanted to say something real quick about that before we move to Han.
Yes, it's true that you will not be very likely to get venture capital if you are an older founder. That's a very sad reality. And I'm working to try to change that reality. And I think many of us here today are also working to try to change that reality because it flies in the face of data. In the meantime, most of the founders that I work with and talk to for the book find ways to get started and bootstrap themselves. And then when they have a proof of concept, when their business is off the ground, they often can raise funding, but not as easily in that early stage. So be prepared to look for alternatives, and those can be friends and family, those can be former business partners, or those can be bootstrapping with your own co-founders.
But it's not to put a downer on the positive message. I think the fact that people are so resourceful and have a sense of determination really just shows that they take this challenge in stride, but it is out there as well. Great, so thank you for that. So we want to move on to our next speaker, and that's Han van Doren. Han, as I mentioned, was the winner of our Silver Starters program in 2019, and is the co-founder of an application called Are You OK Today, that he will tell us a little bit about. But after a long career with IBM, he's had a very successful career as an entrepreneur, and look forward to hearing Han's experience to date in terms of his entrepreneurial journey. So I hand it over to you, Han. You're on mute.
I will try to give a few answers to the why of Mary. Tomorrow, it is exactly 85 years ago that I was born in Amsterdam. And I was caregiver for my wife with dementia for 5 years. And that was one of the triggers of my innovative project. I like to share with you in 10 minutes, 5 items. My motivation to start a business, starting with my own problem, a gift from heaven, my 5 advantages of senior entrepreneurship and the pitfalls, why I did put on my entrepreneur shoes, and what is the ideal age to retire, in my opinion. The motivation started with my own problem. Pretend. I fell down the stairs. How long will it take before somebody finds me? I've seen that with my sister-in-law. I called her and she did not answer the phone. I went to her house, opened the front door, and there were papers of 3 days behind the door. We get regularly our papers delivered at the door. I will not tell you what I saw. My son Matthew called me regularly with the question, how are you chickens? And what is with your vegetable garden? He is not at all interested in that. He is worried about his old father. So we both had a problem. What do you do if you have a problem? You put your requirements on the table. Matthew wanted an app with a traffic light, and when the traffic light is right, is green, then it is okay with me. And I do not want to do any, I want nothing at all. Nothing around my wrist, out my neck, no sensors, no cameras, absolutely nothing. But I need 100% privacy. After 3 months, we find a solution for both our problems. And we have tested that in 100 locations for 3 weeks. I hear your question, how does that work? I use regularly electricity, boiling water, preparing coffee. I have made a self-learning system that learns the pattern of the electricity consumption of each individual device in my home. And when the system detects a deviation, then he does not call Matthew because then my privacy is gone. The system will call me. And when I do not pick up the phone, then there is something wrong. And then Matthew gets a notification and the traffic light in the app changes from green into orange. And when it takes longer, it became red. This free app, Are You Okay Today, has changed my life. I feel safe in my own home again. After that pilot test, I fell in a big hole because I get so many responses on this system that we invented that I have now a database with 1,500 people who like to join, but I had no idea how to start a business. As a gift from heaven, I learned about the Silver Started course. And that Silver Starter course is 7 weeks, 2 days a week, and mainly online. And that really helped me to launch and get Are You Okay Today to the market. I learned a lot of things on that course. Maar let me tell you 3 things especially that I learned. During that course, I felt in love. There's nothing wrong with that, but I felt in love with the wrong one, which is even worse. I felt in love with my self-learning system that I have designed, but I learned that I have to focus on the problem, on the problems of the caregivers, on the problems of the elderly. So focus on the problem. The second thing that I learned is in one picture, give all the aspects of the business model. So I ended up with a piece of paper with my whole business on it, which was very nice. And the last thing that I was very proud of, that I had to make a mission statement. And I invented a mission statement, connect generations to support independent living. And I was very proud of that. I put it on the wall, you cannot see it, but I was very happy with it. During all these few years that I worked on it, I found 5 very specific advantages of senior entrepreneurship. The first one, my age and my vitality, together with my innovative project, is a unique selling point which makes it very easy to attract publicity and get emails, covering even 4 continents. The second thing is that in the past, I would come up, never could put up with this idea. And I learned that with younger entrepreneurs. They told me, if you have a problem, if you are afraid falling down, you can put a button around your shirt. I don't want a button. You can put it around. He don't understand. I do, because I'm a senior. Because I solved my own problem, I found out that people even easier believe me. The fourth thing is, I have a lot of experience now, and that allow me to avoid many pitfalls. And the last one, I have learned as octogenarian that it is easier to grow old vitally if you have a purpose in life, if you know why you are coming out of your bed in the morning. There are, of course, pitfalls, and I did not fall in that, but the pitfalls of senior entrepreneurship could be that you spend too much time to other things, or that you take too much risk, that you lost your savings, or that you get health issues. Why did I put on my entrepreneur shoes? To further develop and market my idea. And as a boy, I went already to the stamp market to sell my collected stamps. I feel useful because I make a contribution to the community. And very important, it is a lot of fun. It is also an advantage that it is a low risk due to my basic income. And I started my new company, and that feels as a lot of positive energy I get out of that, because I can use my talents and learn how to become an entrepreneur. It is one of the best decisions I ever did. I like to finish by telling you that I regularly read articles about enjoying yourself after retirement. After retirement? It looks like everybody is working in a panel camp. I think that is nonsense. You just have to keep busy after you retire. Staying active is the best remedy for a good functioning immune system. Neil Young sung it all the time. It's better to burn than rust, because rusting never sleeps. In Japan, people often work longer after retirement because old age benefits are poor. It is Japan where people are oldest on average. And now my question, what is the ideal age to retire? The answer is never. Retire is a dirty word. It should be refire. Thank you.
You are an inspiration as ever. And I think you answered one of the questions I saw coming along here in terms of there was people asking questions or having a discussion in the chat about what defines a successful company. And when you said making a contribution to the community, that definitely, I think, would be a definition of success and a really good measure of success, as well as the financial aspects, which I think is possibly the traditional way most people might measure success.
May I ask
Absolutely.
one thing? When I go to a birthday party, for instance, and I do not know much people, and you start talking, that within a minute, they ask, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And if you are retired, yeah, I have chickens. Oh, chickens. I have a vegetable. No, they don't interested in that. But if you say I have a business, what kind of business do you? They are interested. That's not.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's a huge difference, and we need to move on. Get started. But that's a hugely important event that happens when people retire. People start defining themselves in the past tense. When they ask people who you are, what you're doing, they say, "I was an engineer. I was a teacher." And if you own a business, if you are an entrepreneur, you're defining yourself in the present. And defining yourself in the present and having an eye on the future is what's going to keep you going and vital for the future. I think that the tense we use to define ourselves is so important. Now, let's move on. Thank you for that, Han. I'm going to see if I can share my screen just to introduce Elizabeth. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Eisel. Elizabeth is the CEO and founder of the Global Institute for Experienced Entrepreneurship, as well as also having an academic role as being a senior fellow in the social innovation and entrepreneur in residence at Babson College. She has done so much work in promoting entrepreneurship and speaking about entrepreneurship among older people at the White House, at the EU. She's spoken all around the world and has so many wonderful insights that I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the work you've done, but especially around some of the work you've done around discovering your entrepreneurial DNA. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Mike. And I'm delighted to be here and thank Ingen as well and all of the organizations that are sponsoring this forum. It's so vitally important. And I also love the fact that when I look at the big screen of all the faces, I see some old friends and new friends there, and just am excited about the energy in the meeting this morning and the energy in this field in general. And it is my belief, really, that positive aging, which is a concept that's been around for about 20 years now, is no longer just for the aging. Positive aging has to do with every single generation, and we need to involve intergenerational and multi-generational aspects of aging in every conversation we have about it. Seniors are the world's fastest growing natural resource, and I love to say we're the only growing natural resource. we are 3.2% versus 0.08% for the rest of the population in terms of our growing statistic. And seniors, as Hans pointed out, seniors are not the problem, they are the solution. Hans saw a problem and he solved it. And that's the spirit of the senior entrepreneur. It's their way of looking at the world. And I heard the other day, and I thought this is really quite profound, in that older individuals may be losing their sight, but they are gaining a new way of seeing. And I love that. To go back a little bit, when I first coined the term in the United States, senior entrepreneur, back in 2012, people would look at me like I was a raving lunatic. Either that, or, you know, I just had my words mixed up and somehow had created this oxymoron. And other people would look at me. I did a presentation for the AARP in the United States, and the audience was extremely receptive to the idea because the audience was older individuals. But one of the AARP executives commented on the fact that my presentation, trying to say something nice, she said, well, that was wildly exuberant. And I don't think she said that in a very kind way, but I also think that really captures my spirit. And as I've said to my children, I said, I want that to be my epitaph, wildly exuberant until her last breath. When I started senior entrepreneurship, it really came after I did a lot of work. I started a blog called Savvy Seniors Work, which was this was back in 2008, about seniors who wanted to stay in the workforce, but were being pushed out the door. And I thought that this is not this just didn't sound right to me. And I had started another nonprofit. My first entrepreneurship effort was in my 50s. And that was very successful, about teaching seniors how to use technology. And one of the best aspects of that was, well, of course, just to back up again, when I first started that, which we called Cyber Seniors, people thought that was the lunatic fringe as well, because why would older people want to learn about the technology? Well, we started with 12 seniors who wanted to learn in Portland, Maine, in the United States. And within 5 years, it had grown to over 25,000 seniors across the United States and American Samoa. But to go forward again, after that startup, and then I did the Savvy Seniors blog to help people, because I was then in my 60s, and I thought, I can't be the only one who wants to continue working. So I went to my webmaster, who was a genius, and I said I wanted to create a blog to find out, you know, what is the scenario around the world for people? Do people over 50 and 60 want to continue working, or am I just projecting myself on this audience? And she very graciously said, well, I will help you set up the blog, but I guarantee nobody's ever going to read it. And she was, of course, 30 years younger than I am, so she didn't quite understand where I was coming from. But she helped me set up the blog, which was incredible, because instead of nobody reading it, within the first 6 weeks of my publishing that blog, Savvy Seniors Work, I had responses from every continent in the world except for Antarctica. Antarctica came on later, but at that point, it was just an overwhelming response of people who wanted to continue working, who wanted to figure out how they could do that, how they could break the bias that was holding them back. So I knew I had touched on something extremely important, and we did a lot of helping people understand how they could up their skills and prepare themselves to continue in the workforce, et cetera. But then, of course, with the financial crisis of 2008, there were no jobs, no matter how well prepared people in their 50s and 60s and 70s were. There were just no jobs, period. So then my question was, what can they do if there are no jobs? And it was like intuitive sense, well, they could start their own business. They could create their own jobs. And so that's why in 2012, I started working on Senior Entrepreneurship Works, which was my new entrepreneurial endeavor. I seem to do this decade by decade. And then what I understood is that, and as people have said this morning and Mary has spoken about, many people, older people, want to start a business, but haven't any idea of how to start a business. But to me, what I found out is that even beyond that, they really don't have any idea of the value of their experience that they bring into an entrepreneurial effort. The word itself, entrepreneurship, is absolutely terrifying. And they think, well, I'm certainly not an entrepreneur. I've just, done work, or I've just been a housewife, or they have all these kind of self-imposed biases that make certain that they don't fit that term entrepreneur. So what we did is at Senior Entrepreneurship Works is we created a program called the Experience Incubator. And this is really an incredible program where we help individuals who are even just thinking about starting a business or thinking about if they could do this, how to translate their experience, their past decades of experience into what they want to do next. And the most important exercise in the incubator, and the one that has really had profound results in terms of helping people identify their entrepreneurial mindset, was called Decoding Your Entrepreneurial History. And in this exercise, the people in the workshop would, decade by decade, number one, name something that they were most proud of, name an accomplishment that they were proud of. And then once they had named that, in the columns to the right, they had to say how they made that happen. What made them think of that in the first place? Who helped them along the way? What challenges did they have to overcome? What resources did they already have to achieve that when they were in their earlier years? And what resources did they have to go out and seek? And how did they find them? And what was most extraordinary about that exercise is the fact that people found they were most entrepreneurial in the first 10 years of their life. Across the board, I would say at least 98% of the people in the workshop had their most entrepreneurial experience in those first 10 years. And I have to say this, while it's exciting, it's also a horrible comment on the education system. I'm not certain about worldwide, but certainly in the United States, where after you pass your first decade, suddenly you have to tamper down your curiosity and you have to get yourself on track to success. And the success that they are defining, which question was raised in some like chat comments this morning, how do you define success? Well, success is this artificial guideline that they have in terms of getting into the right school, getting the right job, getting the right salary, getting the right house, getting your children to the right colleges. And the most damaging aspect of that, besides being so narrow-minded, is the fact that you really had to eliminate any risk. If there was anything, for example, in college that was going to deter you from getting a high grade point average, then you really couldn't take that because you were just so focused and so geared on the success point. So what we do is we help people get back to that kind of curiosity. We help them reinforce that curiosity in terms of what they want to do next, even before we help them determine how they're going to do it next. And then we also, one of the most important factors is, and I think someone mentioned something like this in the chat this morning, people may have an idea of what they want to do. And we say, well, that's great, put that on hold. the first thing you have to determine is why you want to do it. You have to have a purpose behind the what. And once you can explain the why you want to do it, you can actually find people reaching out to you to help, because people in this world, believe it or not today, still have a shared purpose in improving society and humanity and the economic situation for people of all generations and all cultures. So that's what we did on the individual level. And I know I have to speed it up a little here, but once we had grounded people in that and the way of thinking about their entrepreneurial mindset, and that they really had been thinking entrepreneurially for 60, 70 years, but they just never identified that they could do that. The next thing we had to do was to persuade the world, and I'm never afraid of taking on these challenges, but we had to convince the world that this was a valuable asset. This was not some dreaded silver tsunami, which everybody read about, but it really was a silver lining for society and culture worldwide. And so we started hosting forums around the world. I was very fortunate in the Skoll Foundation sponsored these forums because they had asked the Skoll World Forum, Jeff Skoll, when he produces movies like the Marigold Hotel, always has a social aspect to it. And he likes to have a program aligned with the movie that will generate social reforms. And so he approached me, he learned that I had been actually using the Marigold Hotel movie in our workshops as the perfect example of successful intergenerational entrepreneurship. Successful on every single level in terms of enriching the lives of people of all ages and enriching their health and well-being and their cultures. It was a beautiful, it is still a beautiful example. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the movie. But Jeff Skoll then asked if I would create the program in support of the sequel to the first Marigold Hotel movie. And I said, well, I'm not really interested in just giving a prize to people who have started a business. And he said, well, what would you be interested in? I said, I would love to host seminars around the world. We had already done one in Washington, D.C. With the Gerontological Association. And I said, that's the model that I would like to use your movie to get people into the room to have a preview of the new release, and then ask these people who are leaders in that community, in whether they're corporate leaders, whether they're education leaders, whether they're research leaders, government leaders. I said, we need to have an infrastructure to support this phenomenal new economic engine, which are senior entrepreneurs. And he agreed. And so we took our global summits around the world, and it was fascinating, and it worked. Because once people actually saw the value of this asset, I'll never forget the person that was head of all entrepreneurial investment in a very prominent bank in Ireland came up to me afterwards, and he said, I never realized that this demographic was a new opportunity for us to enhance the entrepreneurial investment in Ireland. And we just, with that kind of infrastructure, with the individuals who wanted to create businesses, social enterprises, nonprofits, whatever businesses they wanted to create, now we were building the infrastructure to support that. And you have to have both. And again, it has to, as I said in the beginning, it has to cross all ages. One of the best programs was in Europe, where the EU designed a program called 50 Plus Entrepreneurship, which is still going, and it's a brilliant program. And it's all about education and finance, everything an entrepreneur, a senior entrepreneur needed to start a business. And the reason they allocated such amount of funding towards that is because they recognized the fact that if seniors were building businesses at the success rates that was documented worldwide, then they were also job creators. And one of the biggest challenges in the EU nations is youth unemployment. It's on an average of 20%. In some countries, it was 50% at that time. And they thought, if we can get more seniors and more businesses started and sustainable businesses, then that will mitigate the unemployment rate. So not only are they creating jobs, but they set it up so that younger people could start the business in partnership with older adults. So either whether you're hiring young people or you're bringing in their talent, their technology talent, their social media talent to help you as an older adult start a business, it boosted the economy of the EU nations. And so you get phenomenal examples of how this actually works. This is not just some figment of my imagination. It's not a figment of other people in the audience today, like Wendy Mayhew has done so much in Canada on this topic. It is real and it is happening and it is moving across all aspects of society. I'll just close in terms of saying, we think a lot about sustainability today in the circular economy. And my challenge to people is to start thinking about seniors' experience as a life cycle of experience that we pass on from generation to generation. We talk about reusing, recycling products, but we need an eco design that considers and integrates in its conception the environmental impacts. Throughout the life cycle of a product, we need to also think about the impact of the life cycle of the mind and experience. It's our human capital. And as Antonio Guterres said at the last meeting of the International Day of Older People at the United Nations in 2019, that we need to find more ways to help older individuals continue to contribute. They are key to achieving our sustainable development goals. And I just think that's really extraordinary, an extraordinary announcement from the United Nations. And so collectively, we are gaining on this. And I have to say, when I say senior entrepreneur, no one looks at me as a raving lunatic anymore, but I'll never relinquish the wildly exuberant. As you see, I'm extraordinarily passionate about this subject. So thank you for allowing me to share my views on it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You are indeed passionate about it. And one thing, in getting ready for it today, I watched a few videos or seminars, talks that you'd given on YouTube, that were on YouTube. And one thing I loved that you said about people this age is that they were relentless about remaining relevant. And I think that ties in so well. I love the alliteration as well. I mean, it was just a wonderful way of reminding it, but it ties in so much to the points that all three of you have made about having a sense of purpose, a contribution. And I loved what you said about defining success more broadly than just the traditional values. We are a little bit over time. I had hoped that we'd have a little chat beforehand, but we've covered so much ground. We are going to move into the breakout rooms. But what we're going to do in the breakout rooms is we're going to see if we can help develop a roadmap to help us. There you go, to help people start down their journey towards thinking of their own business. And here we really want to think about some of the barriers, maybe one or two barriers in the breakout groups. Just have a think about it as a journey, a continuum. What might be some of the barriers that are preventing people from taking the first step? And the resources. We've spoken about the resources, or several of our speakers spoke about the resource today. But before we go to the breakout room, just maybe to inspire the conversation, I might ask each of our three speakers to, maybe barrier is the wrong word, but what either internally or externally have you seen as something that's maybe holding people back in starting up their own business? So maybe, I mean, we'll go in the order that we stuck. Maybe Mary, was there anything that you kind of saw as something holding people back that would inspire a chat?
Yes, I think, and Han, you really highlighted this, so thank you. The reason I teach entrepreneurship to older adults is that I think concretely there's sometimes just a lack of experience in what's involved in starting and operating a business. I saw, MVP development go through the chat thread right now. And if you said MVP to someone who wasn't in this group, they probably wouldn't know what you were talking about. And maybe there are people here today who should be happy to say, wait, what on earth is an MVP? So I think that it's a minimal viable product, and it is something that you can rapidly prototype and try out on a test market before you invest a lot in going into more production. So thanks for saying, tell me what it is. And that, we collectively have a lot of information, expertise, and wisdom. I think there's a great need to share that with people who are starting the entrepreneurship journey, particularly with starting an organization or being part of developing a solution in mind. So that's one barrier, and I think we are part of the answer in the spirit of what Elizabeth has just said.
Thanks, Mary. Han, do you have something, an idea?
I think the only barrier I experience is having a silver starter course, because if you have no course, then you have no idea how to start. That course is more or less, in my case, it was a need. And for the rest, it is just go, just do it.
Empowering words, well done, Han. And Elizabeth?
I would say we also have to factor in, people think that as the brain ages, it gets duller. The brain does not get duller at its ages, and we have to reconsider and look at the research that's out there in terms of not only do the neurons continue to grow in one's brain, but there's new research also, which I find fascinating, about the fact that as we age, there are more interconnections between the right side and the left side of the brain. So when we integrate logic and creativity, which is what entrepreneurship is all about, then we really can achieve innovation. And I think the joy, besides the growing neurons, is that when you think of all the dots in the human brain and the neurons that connect them, think of how many more dots there are in the older brain. And there are more dots to connect, so you can think outside the box. This is an innovation that is, you're connecting dots that other people wouldn't normally connect. And if we're doing it now bilaterally across the right and left of your brain, that's one of the most exciting things I've learned. So it's all this research coming out just reinforces what each of us in this room personally believes. So we just have to keep on top of this research, and not just keep on top of it, but talking about it and sharing it, because it's, no one person can make this change. No one country, no one in anything can make this change, and we all have to do it collaboratively, sharing the information and resources that we have so we can move this forward.
And I think, like you say, sharing the story, sharing the experience, I think that's one of the wonderful things about Mary's book, is that she brought out the stories of people who were successful. Hannah's a perfect example, and you're a living example of it yourself. So there's some great tips for people going into the breakout rooms. So hopefully now Elsa B will be able to move us all into the breakout rooms. I think it might take a second, so please be a few minutes, please be patient. But the idea is it's 6 minutes after the hour here. So at the bottom of the hour, so in 24 minutes, we'll come back and get what the groups have spoken about, and then get the reflections of our panelists before we wrap it up for the day. So I wish you all an interesting conversation in your group. All ideas are welcome. No ideas are bad ideas. We heard collaboration and networking is so important. So please let the right and left sides of your brains fire off and have some great conversations. And we'll see you back at the bottom of the hour.
It had its,
Every time I was about to turn to you,
Sharon, it needed its union time off.
Oh, well.
Well,
what a bother.
welcome back, everybody. And we are back exactly on time. So thank you, Elsie, for getting everybody back, I hope. We had enough time for a good discussion. I know in our group, we managed to cover quite a bit of material in the 25 minutes that we had together. So what I'd like to do is, I think there was 6 breakout rooms, if my calculations are correct, to get each of the breakout rooms to maybe give us a little bit a summary of what they discussed. And then we can reflect on it and ask our panelists for their feedback as well afterwards, and before we have a wrap up. So maybe I could call on, Robert was facilitating our breakout room. Maybe Robert, would you like to kick us off and tell us a little bit about the discussion we had?
Yeah, that's all right, Mike. Well, we had a very, very broad discussion about the 2 sub-questions. As far as the barriers are concerned, we all agreed on, one of the most important barriers is the entrepreneur's personality. Many don't have a clue what they exactly are, who they are, what they want. So self-insight, self-reflections, knowing your strength, learning your own strength, your gut, all that stuff that relates to yourself, determine for yourself that, yes, you are, or you can be an entrepreneur. That's an important barrier. Confidence, lack of confidence in many countries. There was a comparison between the European side of this and the US side of that. But obviously in Europe, people are slightly more modest, and that can come across as lack of confidence. So we have stated that, you're not alone. You're not alone on this journey. And then obviously also capital, investment capital, starting capital is a major barrier. But also, since we start late in our lives with a company, with an enterprise, financial planning, and especially towards the end, exit plan is extremely important to make that clear. So personality, confidence, and capital, if you like, those are the 3 barriers we discussed in much more detail than I'm summing it up right now. As far as resources are concerned, then obviously your own personal network with all your former colleagues, managers, or who have you, friends, family, very important to get to know them. Realizing that actually, in our phase of life, you might call yourself an expert. So better understanding your own experience, your own expertise is extremely important, and an extremely important resource. Some of us mentioned our curiosity. And last but not least, we came to the conclusion that wrapping up our entire discussion makes up an excellent content for the Wise Move Society marketing plan for this year, because that is an important resource in many countries for people like us, thinking about and beginning to start our own enterprise. I hope that wraps it up, Mike.
That was a great summary. I was. Crikey.
Yeah, crikey.
I almost didn't need to take notes myself. Wonderful.
Okay, you're welcome.
Nicolette, can we move to you?
Yes, thank you very much. I had the pleasure of being in a 100% female breakout room. So it's then also ended up a bit like how for the senior women starting business, what are the obstacles and what are the success factors? We were actually more talking about the success factors. And one of them, and we haven't heard about that one, is crowdfunding. So we talk about the obstacle could be financing, but crowdfunding can also be a good one to test ideas. And quite often, if you don't get any money, your idea is not very good. So it's a little bit like fail and start all over again. psychological. Because we're older, we don't actually really care anymore what other people think of us. So that's positive. We just do whatever we feel like is good and we don't care what other people think. Resilient. We've learned through all the years, been to recessions, so it's easier for us to bounce back if things are not going the way we want it, or might not be a success, instant success, our business. So it can take longer, but we have our resilience for that. And also ability to listen. And that I think is also, by the way, more generic for the women, I think, in our group. And what we did talk about, what were the downsides of starting later life? Coming from a corporate background is the isolation and finding a partner. And then we had a bit of discussion, do you need a partner or do you need a coach or a mentor? So that was a bit of a side discussion about that. And that women having the lowest level of confidence, but the nice thing is we were all with different cultures in our room. And it was nice that Francis said that in South Africa, actually, the women are more successful. And one of the reasons is they invest in the company and invest their money wise, whereas where men, when they make some money, it's, for instance, will be spent on cars. So I think the cultural aspect was quite an interesting trigger as well in our group. But yeah, it was a very interesting discussion.
That was a very interesting discussion. Interesting that it was an all-women group, and I wonder if that kind of had an impact on some of your ideas.
Yeah.
It was definitely a common theme with our group we had in terms of the role you play as an entrepreneur within an organization, whether you're the front person or somebody who is a participant in a different role as well, maybe second in command or something. Great, thank you very much. Mary Jane, can we ask you for your feedback from your group?
Absolutely. Also a really great discussion. We were 6 in the room. Not to mention ones that have been previously mentioned, but it's kind of a double. Donna mentioned, you know, the health issues that we face as a possible barrier, but also the fact that now that she is not working full-time, but has her own consulting business, she can actually do things that she might never have been able to do before. So it's kind of a double-edged situation, which can be a distinct advantage. Media is a barrier, you know, especially in terms of, I think, Wendy, you were perhaps in the context of investment, but they don't put us, they shine the light on the younger entrepreneurs, but don't shine the light on the senior entrepreneurs. So we could get more support from media. I brought up, but it was because it came up in the conversation, but the loss of identity that we face, you know, when we're getting ready to leave or have left full-time employment, that could be a deterring factor. Lack of preparation. And it was really nice. Despina's now left, but Dow, what they're doing for their older employees is really phenomenal. But so providing the preparation that people need in order to determine, they are having the conversations with their older, ready to or soon to depart employees. What do you want to do? What is, you know, what are your goals with retirement, etc. And so we talked about those kinds of conversations. And Diane Kenwood, she also mentioned about for herself, she'd have a problem pivoting and acquiring new skill set, which is where we came in with resources like Brave Starts, like Silver Starters, like Wise Move Society, where we are offering these kinds of facilities and trainings so that people will get them. Another point that came up, and I think that was also Despina, she mentioned about the dormant network, you know, that sometimes, especially with this pivoting and acquiring new skill sets, if you're having trouble visioning yourself doing what you do now as an entrepreneur, then sometimes it's good to get outside of your immediate network to look for people who don't know you as well in depth in where you've developed your expertise. So those were some of the points that came up in our discussion.
Can I add one more, Mary Jane?
Please do, Donna.
It was one that I didn't get to squeeze in at the very end. It was having to do with IT support. I worked with in companies, and it was wonderful to have like a help desk when my computer crashed or there's something, an issue there. It was so great to just have someone be able to go online and, you know, look at my screen and do, or I can hand over my computer and do this. Now I have to do this all on my own and figure out people, and I've been online with folks. So that has caused me some business interruptions when I've had IT or tech problems. So anyway, I'm just throwing that out.
I think we all become experts at using YouTube to look up solutions for how do I get the background to work in Zoom? Yeah.
Thanks, Donna.
It's a very good point, but it goes back to network as well and knowing who you can call on within your network. Maybe I'll move to Cecile next. I don't see her on the screen, but are you here?
Thanks, Mike. Alan actually took over, and he did the facilitation today, so I'm very happy to give the word to him.
Okay.
Thanks.
I did ask actually if anybody was scheduled to be the facilitator.
You didn't take over. We decided that you would do it. Apologize for the miscommunication here.
I feel terrible now. I won't. Anyway, yeah, thanks, Cecile. We had a discussion, which I think a number of points have been raised already, which have come to our discussion. Confidence came up. Support, you know, both as a barrier and also as a resource needed, you know, the importance of having a network and also, you know, the barrier that's presented by not having a network and what that network actually provides as well, you know, is a network is, you know, people to call on when you know something, but also, as other people have pointed out as well, sources of inspiration really, and sources of emotional support in other people, you know, being in the same space. So, you know, networks came across as hugely important as a resource. You know, on the conversation of resources again, you know, the lack of appreciation about how much is out there for nothing. It was raised as well, you know, so there's a lot of stuff which is on the web, whether it's market research or whether it's tools, and some of them can be bookkeeping tools and other tools. There's a lot of stuff out there which is around for free. And I think Anne, I think, pointed out that you know, perhaps one of the key ingredients of an entrepreneur is resourcefulness. So, you know, what an entrepreneur needs is the resourcefulness to go out and find things when they need them. So for those people who aren't entrepreneurs, haven't got that mindset of resourcefulness, that can be a barrier to being an entrepreneur as well. Yeah, the idea of finance, raising finance, it was interesting to hear the perspective just presented actually, which was that women spend the money in a different way, which is an interesting point actually, and that women might actually be more successful older entrepreneurs than men, because we did have this question crop up in our group. We hear about the statistics for older against younger, but do we hear the statistics of older women versus older men in terms of success? And so the idea was put forward that maybe older women, whatever criteria of success you use to measure, you know, might actually have the edge on men for one reason or another because of the way money's handled, perhaps. Other things that came up, resources needed, yeah, the importance of health, both physical and mental health, in relation to being able to sustain your working pattern in an older life. And of course, that probably feeds through into the way that people run their businesses as well. So what demands are they going to create for themselves, which drain on those physical and mental resources, and knowing when to call in somebody else for support rather than actually taking on all those demands by ourselves, you know, a key element of sustaining work. What else do we get? Yeah, I guess it's the point I introduced, maybe because of my own personal inclinations or biases. But I put to the group whether they're, you know, whether as a group we were a rather privileged group addressing this question, in that perhaps we represent people who have had a professional life and maybe done reasonably well in that professional life to the extent where we've been able to build up our personal financial resources to be able to take a bit of a risk to be able to step out of the workforce for a year or 2 years and support ourselves whilst working on what it is we want to do next. And in saying that, you know, if that's the case, you know, is there another group of people who aren't here today, who don't have those personal resources and yet have to sustain themselves in a longer life and perhaps a longer working life? So what resources do they need? Do we need to support them, or is some of the resource that's needed that's not representing people who aren't here today? So that's a final thought.
That's an important point as well. Extending our networks to help people who don't have the resources that we may have.
And if Cecile wants to add to that, then please do, Cecile.
You've done it wonderfully. Thanks, Alan.
Okay.
2 more groups to go. Maybe just to keep, we'll try and keep it a little bit short, because I would love to get the reflections of the panelists before we tidy up, and I'm respectful of people's time as well. Rachel, I think you had one, we're leading another group discussion.
I think Rachel was saying her mic isn't working, unless that's changed, Rachel. Don't know. Okay. So I'll sort of run that. I mean, I don't want to kind of repeat some of the things. We spoke a lot about mindset and the importance of networking and pulling on help and all those things. I mean, I think a couple of other points just to raise as well. Katie flagged up something which I think is quite important, which all of us have now got the resource, at least certainly the legal right, to ask employers for flexible working or part-time working, so that you can free up the time resource, because actually a lot of the time the success to entrepreneurship is about being free of other caring responsibilities, time barriers, financial barriers. So if you can free up a time barrier by acquiring flexible working and actually using that opportunity to ask an employer to sort of support your time resource, that's a really interesting and I think a very good point. I mean, just from a practical point, I mean, I've kind of popped in the chat, somebody was saying about IT issues. We certainly, you know, the company that I've put in there, very, very cheap for like a yearly annual contract, and there doesn't seem to be anything that they can't help you with. So whether it's hooking up to a printer or anything like that, they all do it live. I use them all the time. They are brilliant. Another free resource is, so yes, you've probably got your local council or your local government that might well supply a lot of free access to free courses. In the UK, there's something called Enterprise Nation, and that's been really heavily funded by the government to help support. And they do literally daily events, webinars, workshops, marketing, branding, how you'd set yourself up in the first place, financial planning, and so on and so forth. And then the last thing I'd say is that Mike is about to kick off a startup program for Brave Starts as well, and that'll be a free pilot. So in terms of what Han was talking about, and having that kind of network of people supporting and all on that same journey and helping each other out, then that's something we obviously want to try and get some feedback on as well going forward. So if I've missed anything from our group that hasn't already been said, feel free to add it in, but I don't want to kind of labor the points too much.
Thanks, Lucy. And I am really looking forward to that entrepreneurship discussion with the Brave Starts group. Ingen, you were the certainly last but not least. And
yes, I'm the last, so I'm going to keep it short because a lot of things already have been said. So I just want to add because some of them already had businesses and sold it and are considering or in the first stages of the building a next business. It is all about that risk, and it is about the knowledge that you have to put in many, many hours, because it's not going to be easy. There are going to be challenges. So that is absolutely something to also the responsibility, especially if you are in a phase that you can hire people, you have the responsibility of those people, of their families. You have to pay them every month. So it's those things that are also considered. Needs are very much about passion and purpose. You need that, otherwise, if there's no why, then you don't really have to do this. And the trust in yourself, confidence, of course, something that you need. And of course, you see that a lot of these barriers can immediately be translated into needs. What you need to do. And, for Wise Move Society as well, we are an organization that is very much focused on what is that way of creating that financial stability later in life as well. So really focus also with our programs on senior entrepreneurship and all these things, but not just on entrepreneurship, also finding solutions for the new challenges that we are facing, and do that together. Because, you know, doing it together in this tribe, in this network, new friends, is always so much more fun than doing it on your own. So leave it up to that.
That's great. That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Ingen.
May I add one to the group?
Certainly, please.
Okay. What I went to I'm in the US, and I attended UMass Boston Masters in Gerontology, and it was all online. That's the way the program works. So I was online before anybody else was online as a thing in Zoom. And so I was pretty comfortable with it. But here's the thought. When I left the online community, graduated, and stayed connected with the university, there were a group of us who wanted to go back and stay connected with our online community without a homework assignment. So now we have an alum group, and we're gathering the names and the email lists and so on. And I highly recommend this to everyone here for your master's program, your undergraduate program, your PhD programs, your certificates, wherever they are. Go back to the university, and two things will happen. One, you'll be reconnected with your class as well as older, and then those who are coming up. So we have the younger and many ages, as well as stay connected with your university. They really need you to be a speaker. They need you to be a moderator. They need you to be a mentor. That's my thought.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And universities are a great source of knowledge and sharing, and have amazing networks that can really, really help out as well. We're going to ask the last poll, the same question again. I'm just interested to see if there's a difference. I'll ask Ingen to put that, or sorry, not Ingen, Elsabie to put that poll up for us. But we've only got a few minutes left. And while you're answering the poll, I would like to get our panelists' views on what they've heard in the discussion. And I know we've heard a lot, but I'll try and summarize some of the things that I think were common to all groups. I mean, I think most groups mentioned mindset, confidence as one of the barriers in taking the next step and looking for some resources. What's your feeling on that in terms of how can we help give people a little bit more confidence? Because I love the idea that I heard in all of your three talks about the fact that the ideas are there. The older we are, the more ideas we have, and the more sort of things gel together. But if we were able to combine those ideas with the confidence, I think we will be an unstoppable force going forward. And just would love to hear your thoughts on that. Maybe, Mary, do you want to start?
Of course. I'm one of the US over-exuberant, always confident people. So yes, I have, from all of the great things that came out of today, just one other idea to offer. And that is, we will do best and change the world more readily by not being in silos. We also, and I know this was part of the program that kicked off the summit, we need and want to be intergenerational in all of our entrepreneurial efforts and networks. And in our breakout room, someone pointed out that in South Africa, there are no accelerators or incubators for older people. And I chimed in that that's almost the case. There's a few, but only a tiny minority for older people in the US. Let's just change that. This is something we can do. And I love Sharon's point about working with our universities and other groups that we're in. All of the groups that we're in should have an intergenerational component, in my opinion. And that, Mike, does get back to your question, which is how to build confidence. Let's build confidence by admitting we don't have all the answers, because no one person of any age has all the answers. Yeah. Let's be more collaborative and join hands with intergenerational efforts to start groups, start companies, and help each other change the world.
Thank you very much. That's great. And that intergenerational aspect, I think, and collaborative and inclusion is really how we build confidence, because, as you say, no one person has all the answers, but together we get very far. Han, maybe if you want to answer the same question, or if there's another point from listening to the discussion that you wanted to reflect on.
I should say, when you retire, you can go traveling, play bingo, or do other things. And that can be a lot of fun. You can also sneak up and doing something. I have noticed that is hugely satisfying. So I would invite everyone, when you retire, ask yourself the question, what do I want to be? Thank you.
I remember you saying that 2 or 3 years ago when you won the prize. It is stuck in my head, and I have quoted you many, many, many times for that. The idea of when I retire, what do I want to become, is such a powerful thing to think about. I mean, it's something you ask a child, what would you like to become when you're older? We should continue to ask ourselves that question all through life. Elizabeth, wondering if you had any final reflections for us.
I thought the conversation, both the formal conversation and the informal conversation, was so encouraging because people are approaching this from all different aspects and asking all the right questions. Nobody is sitting here saying, I have all the answers. There's so many questions that still need to be addressed, and we need to keep raising those questions. One thing I would say in terms of, we clearly established, or certainly have begun to establish, the value of an older adult's experience. And we think of that experience as a form of knowledge. But I would recommend everybody listen to the author of Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling's commencement address to Harvard University, where she talked about, yes, knowledge is important, but imagination is everything. And you can have all the knowledge in the world, but unless you exercise your imagination and curiosity, you're never going to get beyond that core body of knowledge. And that is what is crucial to an entrepreneur. As Peter Drucker has said, curiosity is the elixir of life, and it's the elixir of entrepreneurship.
I don't think I could have picked a better way to wrap up our discussion. We're 2 minutes to the end, but the idea that curiosity is the elixir of life is so empowering. And for having listened to the conversation today, we have it in abundance, certainly within this group, and I think within this demographic. So it's an incredibly powerful message going forward and really empowering for us to think about what we can do with the next step. Before we close up, I wanted to say thank you very much to Wise Move Society and Brave Starts for organizing the event, to our 3 speakers today, and to our facilitators for leading wonderful discussions. It was very inclusive. I did not get to all of the questions. I did my best. I had prepared questions as well and tried to get to some of the questions here, but the conversation was just too rich to everything. But the wonderful thing about today was that in the chat, I can see that lots of the questions were already answered. Before Ingun has got something she's going to ask us.
Well, if you are thanking people, then I would like to add someone who I forgot on Tuesday, but there's a very important person at the whole preparation of the summit, and also today behind the scenes, and that's Elsa B in South Africa, because she's doing an amazing job. So I really would like you to
thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you, she's amazing. Yes, thank you, Elsa B.
And thank you for reminding me. I've been SMSing her as we were going along, and I completely forgot to say thank you. Sorry about that. But just as we're at the hour, I want to see if Lucy wanted to give us just a short update in terms of our next session on Tuesday, just as a little bit of a teaser to make sure that we all come join again.
Yeah, I thank you all for today. Our final session in this series is on Tuesday next week. So the same time as this, 2 till 4, Tuesday afternoon. And the aim of that is really to kind of wrap up almost everything that we've done and finish on a high. This is the age of 50 plus. This is an age of the golden age, if you like, the reason to be optimistic. So our goal for Tuesday will be to have you leave that day thinking, there's never been a better time to be more than 50.
That is a great invitation for next Tuesday. We're looking forward to it. Thank you, everybody, for your contribution today. It's been a wonderful discussion and my privilege to be part of it. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you on Tuesday. Take care.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.